the National Firearms Act, tax and registry of suppressors, and our special guest, Tom Grieve. This is The Loaded Mic, and I'm Dan Wass. The 1934 National Firearms Act was created for the purpose of regulating certain firearms, but there was also a tax imposed on the manufacture and transfer of many firearms. So although a tax on a God-given right is unconstitutional and considered a chilling effect because it's created for the purpose of deterring the exercising of a right, it's still been allowed to exist. Imposing a tax on firearms or ammunition effectively raises the cost of exercising the right. This can have a chilling effect, especially on low-income individuals, discouraging them from purchasing firearms for lawful purposes like self-defense or hunting. The chilling effect argument suggests that even if the right isn't outright banned, it's inhibited through financial burdens. And the U.S. Supreme Court has held that the government cannot place a tax or fee on the exercise of First Amendment rights, such as requiring costly license to publish a newspaper or speak in public. So by analogy, taxing guns or ammo is seen as placing a burden on a constitutional right, namely the Second Amendment. So not only does the NFA impose an unconstitutional tax on firearms, it also is a de facto gun registry because all the firearms listed in the NFA must be registered with the government, ultimately creating a gun owner's list. Now, this too is unconstitutional. For more Second Amendment content, check out my Good Gun, Bad Guy book series at goodgunbadguy.com. Now, we're going to talk about this and many other things with He's So Smart, Your IQ Will Increase Just by Being Friends with Him on Facebook, John Chiara. And he's on Facebook, but his online privileges have been revoked due to an unsightly incident in a comment section. Anthony Diso. And I want to welcome our special guest, ex-criminal prosecutor, current criminal defense attorney, and one of the greatest Second Amendment minds in America, Tom Grieve. Tom, welcome to the show, and thanks for being here, buddy.
Hey, thanks. It's a privilege to be on. Thank you.
Well, so although the NFA has been violating the rights of Americans for almost 100 years now, it seems to be on the ropes, and it looks like we might have a good chance of possibly clawing back some of our rights. So, or is that just wishful thinking? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I just really hope we can get the same gun rights that Europeans have been enjoying for decades, because that's what we're trying to do right now. I'm just trying to get to the point where we're Norway, we're Finland, where you can purchase suppressors over the counter. They're less regulated than cigarettes in Europe. Think about that.
Wow.
Okay. Right. And of course, over here, you pretty much, it's European in a cup. I mean, it's endless for what the ATF puts you through.
Yeah, no, it's especially in some of these states, like the state that we live in. Unfortunately, we're in New York, and it's just they're coming down with all sorts of stuff. And I know we probably don't even have time to get into it. I do have a list of the New York stuff that I wanted to get your opinion on. But really, I think right now, what's on everybody's mind is the suppressor thing and the short barrel stuff as it relates to the NFA. Can you tell us what's going on? Because it's changing day by day. I'd like to know what your thoughts are. Where are we with it? What's going to happen with it? What do you see? Explain so people who don't know what's going on.
Yeah. So short barrel rifles, of course, are one thing that's regulated under Title II of the National Firearms Act. That means you got to get the tax stamp, you got to do your Form 1, Form 4, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you got to get a gun trust, or maybe for folks that live in plus minus between 8 to 11 states, depending on what we're talking about, none of the above. You just don't have the option of exercising your rights by purchasing a suppressor or by purchasing a short barrel rifle. What Congress is trying to do right now is they're trying to push through a couple different bills. And I'm not going to go super high detail because frankly, we've moved beyond that point in some respects. So we're just going to keep it broad strokes. And if you guys want to drill in, more than happy to do that. On the suppressor front, we have now, as part of the Trump administration's big, beautiful bill, we have elements of the Hearing Protection Act, the HPA, which was championed, among other groups, by, of course, the one, the only Gun Owners of America, GOA. And they pushed through the fact that we're going to be taking off the NFA registry suppressors. So off the NFA registry, no more tax stamp, no more going through the ATF for purchase. It's basically, if this all gets through, is going to be treated the same way as would purchasing a normal long arm would in most states. I say most states because there's 50 states, at least about a dozen of you guys have crazy laws that are like, you know, little fingerprints and snowflakes of like, this changes by the day.
Yep.
Like, you know, you're shaking up the snow globe to figure out like, where are you guys at on gun laws for this particular week? So, but by and large, you're going to be able to purchase suppressors if this all gets through the same way you would a long arm, so a shotgun, a rifle, something like that. On the Short Barrel Rifle Act, that did not make it into the big, beautiful bill. So that remains for the time being a standalone bill. There's hope that it'll be added in on the Senate side. You have to deal with something called the Byrd Rule for all this. If you want to get into that, we can get into that.
Could you just brief us on the Byrd Rule? I'm somewhat familiar with it, but for people who don't understand what it is, just real quickly, bullet points on it.
Yeah, so this isn't going to be going through right now. If the table runs the way it's set up right now, this is not going through as a vanilla piece of legislation. This is going through basically a budget process.
Right.
Okay.
Byrd Rule is about taxes, right? About tax and budget.
Correct. The issue for the Byrd Rule is that you cannot put things through the budget process that are meant to be policy oriented. This is supposed to be budget and tax oriented. So the good news, bad news, if you're an anti-gunner, is, hey, the courts have been very explicit about the fact that this is a tax. This is a $200 tax when it comes to purchasing or manufacturing a suppressor or short barrel rifle. So that's the issue. And I've heard from many different people who know tons more about this than I do when it gets into those, you know, the wonks on congressional law, congressional rules, all that kind of stuff. They feel very confident that they're on very safe ground. So right now, the suppressors passed the House as part of the big, beautiful bill. Short barrel rifles are not on that. The hope is that it'll be added through the Senate, and maybe we'll get the reconciliation, all that other kind of stuff coming through. TBD.
Okay. I have a ton of questions, but let me get to one of our sponsors real quick. You want to know who's fighting for your gun rights? Gun Owners of America. Now, GOA is the No Compromise Gun Rights Group, and I urge you to become a member at gunowners.org. What have they done? Well, GOA secured a preliminary injunction against the ATF pistol brace rule. GOA members submitted a record 85,000 plus comments opposing the ATF's universal registration check rule. They helped enact permitless carry in Nebraska and Florida, and GOA secured victories in California, Illinois, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Plus, they won 2 legal victories against the ATF's zero-tolerance policy, and GOA fought to overturn Joe Biden's ban on funding hunter education, shooting sports, and archery in schools. So with all the constant attacks on our Second Amendment, we often ask ourselves, well, what can I do about it? Well, this is what you can do. You can become a member at gunowners.org and help us save the Second Amendment. So, Tom, you mentioned one thing that was really, it's been bugging me. I saw your video about the different categories, okay, the states, how you categorized all the states into 3 buckets. Some were good with respect to this new suppressors potentially being pulled out of the NFA, but some were not. You had 3 levels. Can you briefly tell us what those 3 levels are, and why was New York not included at all in your video? Is New York just totally exempt from all that stuff?
Yeah. So I focused in on 16 states in that video. And the reason why I focused on those 16 states is because those are the 16 states that say you can possess suppressors upon meeting certain conditions. And those conditions can be classified into 3 or 4 different buckets. Now, for the other 34 states I did not talk about, that means they fall in one of 2 different categories. Either A, everything's legal, no contingencies, and part of that could be the law is silent, like, for instance, Florida and many other states where they just don't talk about suppressors at all. There's just silence, okay? Or they're part of states where this is just always illegal all the time, okay? So if you were not part of the 16, then that means you fall in one of those two different categories, and you probably know who you are in that respect.
Probably do, but where can people go to find that video? Because it was really a great video you did.
Yeah, if you just jump on my YouTube channel, just put in Tom Grieve into your YouTube machines, and if you click my channel, or if you put in Tom Grieve suppressors, I'm sure it'll show up pretty much towards the top if I had to guess.
I would recommend everybody watch that, especially if you're unsure of where your state stands. So my state in New York was the law basically just says they're illegal, period. So, yeah. But anyway, so you said that so short barrel. Do you guys have any questions for Tom? I don't want to.
No, not yet. It's good.
Because I'm just getting rolling here, and I don't want to leave you guys. But short barrels did not. The short barrel. Pulling short barrels out of the NFA did not make it through the House. It wasn't part of it, but you're saying they could possibly be introduced in the Senate. How would that work, and what is your opinion on whether or not the whole thing is going to make it through the Senate?
Well, that's a larger political calculation in your last question about whether or not the whole thing is going to make it through. And, we live in, it's difficult to imagine at least in recent decades, a more political times than right now, particularly when we talk about the bipolarity of the parties and where they're at, what they're trying to do and so forth. But I mean, there's a lot of Republicans, so I'm from Wisconsin, including my own Senator Ron Johnson. I just saw in our local newspaper is saying that basically he's not voting for the big beautiful bill as of right now, and he's a right-wing Republican as far as they go. So, in Wisconsin, we only do things by extremes. We either elect people to the far right or to the far left, and that is it. So if you see an R from Wisconsin, that's not for Rhino. That's a hardcore righty, and odds are the same for the D as well. So that's just an example of the opposition to which, to my knowledge, comes from a couple different sources, but none of them have anything to do with the Hearing Protection Act. But my hope is that it does get added back in. I should just add, because I did get a lot of comments on that video, and that video went to about 400,000 views, and it's still climbing. One of the common questions I got on that, maybe I'm taking some of the thunder here from one of your future questions, but it's such a big deal. Hopefully you don't mind me bringing this up. One of the big questions that came out of that over and over and over again, people melting my phone, people melting my inbox, people commenting, you name it, was, well, look, the bill isn't going to harm the states that have this contingency. So I mentioned the 16 states have a contingency. What does that mean? What it means is that you have to comply with something, and then you're fined to possess suppressors. So for instance, here in Wisconsin, it is legal under state law if you are in possession of a suppressor, subject to complying with federal law.
Right.
Other states have a registration requirement that specifically says you have to register. Yeah, we're back to like 5th grade grammar, because the verbs unfortunately matter when we're talking about law. Okay, why do they matter? Because if the cookie crumbles the wrong way, then even though it has been essentially deregulated and stripped out of the National Firearms Act Title II, so now you can just purchase it like a normal suppressor or like a normal long arm or something like that. The downside now is, yeah, but I can't be in compliance with my state law. I've got no one to register it with because the feds are no longer registering it.
Yeah, right.
Does that mean I now have a de facto ban? So the bill, and this is something, whenever you make a YouTube video, everybody's audience is a little bit different. I have learned, probably just because I'm an attorney, and there's a natural inclination to drone on and on and on. So I have learned that your audience, there's like a massive drop off after 12 minutes. So I really do everything I can to try to squeeze whatever it is I want to talk about inside 12 minutes. The next thing on the cutting room floor, and I'm probably gonna make a follow-up video to deep dive into this, but you guys can get kind of the sneak peek into it, is the fact that in the bill, it was added into a process later on. They're talking about the fact that, look, you have the federal government trying to preempt the states by saying you can't do anything that makes suppressors illegal. Basically, suppressors are fine. If it was contingent upon something, it's fine. It's fine. So you have this notion of a federal government preemption rule kind of kicking in. And I didn't discuss in the video just because it's not a short discussion. And frankly, for a lot of people, it's probably a little boring. You get into 10th Amendment issues and all this other kind of stuff. But right. So there's some people who think that, look, people are going to be totally fine. There's other people who are a little bit concerned. I think it's going to largely depend on where your state falls, and as always, what the courts do.
Yeah. And that's why it was really disturbing for me to go back and revisit the New York law. And because I was looking for what you said in your video, which was really helpful, was that a lot of the state laws will say, like you said, as long as you're in compliance with federal law. And that puts you in one of those good buckets. Well, so I went back and I looked at the New York law, and it had nothing like that. It just said, nope, they're illegal. And so that was a little disappointing, but I should have expected it, right? I should have known, already.
Aren't you used to that by now? I mean, Come on, you can't. You Charlie Brown yourself on that. You've got no one to blame but yourself.
I know. I did want to talk before we run out of time, because I know you got to be out of here shortly. John, did you have a question for him? I thought you said you had a question.
No, I was just saying, I just saw Johnson from Wisconsin on the All In podcast, and he was explaining how a lot of this stuff works and why he wasn't supporting certain things. But it was very interesting. I didn't realize you were from Wisconsin until you just said that. But he's an interesting guy, though, right? But he's definitely hardcore on some of this stuff.
Yeah, he's very hardcore. He is. We really don't have rhinos here, and we really don't have. We used to, of course, have moderates, if you go back to the 90s, but, ever since then, it's really been very bipolar here. Either Milwaukee and Madison get their way and they elect someone from the far left, or some of the more conservative suburbs and some of the more conservative counties get their way, and because both bases just nominate the people who they want to nominate. And I don't know, nobody seems to care about how electable they are. They're just gonna nominate people who they want to nominate. And that's great. But that's the reason why it's like, holy shit. I mean,
right.
It's we're playing for both extremes here.
We have normal people here, and then we have Hochul, our governor, who's out of her freaking mind.
Well, at least
she gets elected again. It's I can't even imagine.
At least Stefanik is doing pretty well, according to the polls. So she's getting close.
The thing is, though, if she gets elected, she's not going to be able to push any bills. It's all Democratic legislation.
Well, yeah,
she'll get nothing.
That is kind of.
She'll just be a bird hanging in a cage.
At least she'll be able to maybe stop some of the bad legislation. But I guess we'll see.
Well.
Tom, I want to get to one of our sponsors real quick, but I also want, after this, I want to talk to you about National Concealed Carry Reciprocity and get your opinion on that. But first, Cali Key. This device, the Cali Key, removes your AR from the definition of an assault weapon. Did you know that when so-called assault weapon ban lists are created, they exclude manually operated bolt-action firearms? So just by dropping the Cali Key into your direct impingement AR in place of your semi-automatic BCG, you'll have a bolt-action rifle that falls outside the definition of so-called assault weapon. You don't have to do anything else. So give the Cali Key a look, because with it, you could retain all your rifle's features, avoid registration complications, revive your black rifle sales if you're an FFL, regain the ability to do private party transfers, legally transport across hostile jurisdictions, hunt with your AR in areas like Pennsylvania, enhance long-range precision and quieter suppressed shooting. Cali Key has state-specific expert attorney opinions on its website and supports grassroots Second Amendment organizations with its sales. Cali Key's mission is to empower customers and claw back our civil liberties. So go to calikey.com and use the discount code LOADED. All right, Tom, before we run out of time, we got about, looks like we only have about not even 10 minutes here, but I want to, maybe about 10 minutes. National Concealed Carry Reciprocity, what are your thoughts on, where is it right now? What are the chances of this becoming an actual reality? And then a couple other questions, but go ahead. First, I want to get you rolling on that.
Yeah, so this obviously sounds like a great idea if you live in a state where you're just on lockdown, right? Nobody may recognize your license, or very few states recognize your license, or you're trying to travel into a state that doesn't recognize any outside licenses. So for me as a Midwesterner, we call that place Illinois. where they're not going to recognize anybody's license.
Right.
The solution is you don't go there, as I tell people.
Yeah.
Friends don't let friends go to Chicago. Is just what it boils down to. But just the same, they're just really unfortunately situated, and you find yourself driving through frequently. I mean, New Jersey can play the same role on the Eastern Seaboard and so forth. So there are definitely convenience features and pickups that we would get for it. The argument against it is anything that comes from DC can disappear from DC. Do we really want? If I live in Texas, if I live in Florida, if I live in a solid red state, is this a W or an L for me? Because I think you can actually have that discussion. That being said, I think on balance it's a win. But from a practical perspective of do I see it going through? From the folks I talk to who are highly connected on the Hill, the answer is no. There's not enough R's in the Senate because we've got to get through the filibuster, and that just is what it is.
Well, that's disappointing. Yeah, but
welcome to America.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was going to ask you that if it did, would it be possible for states like California, New York, Illinois to just, not comply with it?
Well, so that gets us back to that discussion around the 10th Amendment. So you're begging to take the plunge, and I promise I'm going to not do this in such a way that paint is peeling off the walls and so forth. Here's the general concept. We got this thing called federalism, which is the fact that there's a balance of powers, right, between the federal government and the state governments. Where do you draw the lines and how do you draw them? Well, one of the key concepts of this is that states generally retain policing powers. So, for instance, the feds can't mandate that something has to be legal, which states say no. So, for instance, if the feds legalize cannabis, for instance, you probably could have states that still want to ban it. Okay. The reverse is not always the case, however. There can be specific issues, and there's case law from the United States Supreme Court talking about when the feds can ban something, and that just trumps everything. And there's a test, and there's all this other kind of stuff. So that's really a 10th Amendment issue. Now, the exciting thing about this is that this is the burden of victory that we are dealing with right now, okay? Because we're not talking about the 10th Amendment if the last election went the other way, okay? We're talking about Second Amendment. We're talking about Fourth Amendment. We're talking about First Amendment. We're talking about other stuff. By the time we get to a 10th Amendment argument, that suggests, most likely, that we probably hold DC and we're trying to expand people's access to the Second Amendment. And that's exactly what we're talking about here when it comes to suppressors, potentially short barrel rifles, when it comes to maybe concealed carry law, because that is, at the end of the day, a criminal law issue of how can you carry firearms, how can you transport firearms, all that kind of stuff. And where can you carry them to, for instance, depending upon where the feds are going to go with everything. So, for instance, are they just saying, hey, everybody's got to recognize everybody else's concealed carry laws, or are they going to go further and going to say something along the lines of, and by the way, you can't carry in schools
right.
and police stations and prisons and 3 or 4 other places, but everything else is fine, right? Again, private property owners can always disallow if they want to. So, or are they just going to leave all those kind of regimes in place? So those really come down to, among other things, primarily 10th Amendment ground. And like I said, 10th Amendment, if we're talking 10th Amendment, that means we're winning. Okay, so that's the reason why you've probably almost you've never heard me talk about it before. You've probably never heard most other attorneys talk about it before in the Second Amendment context. Because frankly, we're always on our back foot, down 40 points in the fourth quarter, trying to come back, okay? These are new problems. These are exciting problems to have.
Yeah, exactly. And just to read a little bit of the 10th Amendment, all other powers not prohibited to the states are reserved for the states or the people. Kind of like what you're talking about. So, wow, yeah, it's frustrating to watch because we see all these big national gun cases brewing. And, not that it was a national, it was a New York State case, but it had rippling effects across the country because of its precedents that Judge Clarence Thomas, especially with the historical tradition portion of it. But then you get states like New York. I keep talking about New York because it's so difficult here. But 8 days after, the Bruin case, Hochul comes out with this new Concealed Carry Improvement Act, which was essentially all the same crap except worse. So, Tom, what you're talking about is they can make all these, you might have the right to carry everywhere, but the states can individually make all these specific places gun-free zones or, safe places or whatever. And that's exactly what she did. So she basically turned almost every public place a gun-free zone or a sensitive location.
Unless they posted it otherwise, right?
Which was a really
Flip
weird...
the whole thing around backwards.
Exactly. So in other words, the business owner would have to post a sign saying guns are welcome. You'd have to have written consent or permission from the property owner that you could carry. And who's going to do that, right?
Is that enforced now?
Well, Tom, do you know exactly where that stands in New York? I know maybe you're not following that New York stuff. So
yeah, so I'm digging back in my memory. I want to say that part of the legislation was enjoined and blocked. To my vague recollection, I'm going to put myself at a 70%.
Well, I'll back you up on that because it was. I think pretty sure it was one of four things, and another was the social media, and there was a couple other things.
Yeah, the social media was blocked because it endangers anonymized speech. So that was one issue. If you want to create an anonymous Facebook account and talk about how awful politicians are, or talk about religion, or talk about something that is, because there's layers of free speech, right? Like not all speech is free speech, right? Generally, you have 5 categories of prohibited speech, like death threats, things like that. At the other end, you've then got protected speech, things about religion, things about politics, things like that. And then you got this squishy area of commercial speech, which is kind of allowed, but they can regulate it. And that's the reason why, I'm generally veer pretty small government in my views, but I will say I do like the fact that, from time to time, we are able to cut down on these spam calls. And the reason why is because that's regulated as commercial speech. So they're allowed to do things about
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So we have some ammunition to fight against scammers. That's pretty good.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, don't get too excited, but every now and then we get something, and then the scammers, just like New York, they find a way around it.
Find a way, yeah.
And this goes back to President Obama's administration, where there was a conscious decision. I was reading an article talking about this, where they knew that they were going to get their butts kicked in the Supreme Court. Like they knew they were going to have a losing record in the Supreme Court. But the reason why they were entirely accepting of that is the fact that in any given year, the Supreme Court can only accept between about 1.5 to 2% of petitions for redress. So the court can only hear, they only have the bandwidth to hear between 1.5 to about 2%. Now, some years it goes up because there's less petitions. Other years it sags a little bit, but it's about there. Okay. So they figured, look, we are going to lose in the Supreme Court, but because a lot of these other circuits, depending upon when and where we're talking about, they go right, they go left, but in the DC circuit, I think at the time it was left leaning. So if you want to sue the federal government, depending upon what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it, you often had to go through that circuit. And they knew that circuit was going to be pretty favorable to them. And then there's literally not enough bandwidth to appeal it to the Supreme Court. So they figured, we're going to do 1,000 policy initiatives. We're going to lose, let's say there's not enough resources to sue everybody all the time. So just right there, that's one set of problems. That's one bottleneck in the system. So let's say there are 1,000 policies attract 100 lawsuits. Okay, fine. We are going to probably win 95 of them between the trial court and the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, where we think most of these are going to be brought, and we're going to lose 5 of them in the Supreme Court. And that's not going to be good, but at the end of the day, they made the very Machiavellian calculation of, yeah, but that just means our record's 95-5.
Well, that's just the chipping away.
Let's do it.
Like that's the chipping away eating around the edges of the Second Amendment. And pretty soon you're at the core. And we talked about John and I were talking about forced reset triggers earlier. Little things that they're, that they try to nibble around the edges of the Second Amendment.
And it's all stuff that only applies to legal gun owners who never shoot anyone.
Well,
it's just insanity. I mean, I can never get around that in my head. I'm like, who are these people that are out there shooting everybody that we're all worried about?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and Tom comes from this, obviously, from the legal perspective of it all, but we come at it from a perspective that, wait a minute, none of this stuff is helping to solve crimes or stop violence. None of it, because the only and I know people have said this over and over, and I almost hate to say it, but the only people who follow the laws are the law-abiding people. It's the criminals aren't paying any attention to any of this stuff anyway.
So it's total infringement, basically. Everything is a nibbling at the right.
Right.
How you look at it, right?
Well, and then you have to ask yourself the question: do they understand this? And of course, they understand this. So I want to get Tom's opinion, but when I look at it like that, of course, they understand what they're doing. They understand that what they're really doing is restricting lawful citizens. Why? Why, Tom? Why? Why are they?
Yeah. I mean, look, the end game couldn't be more clear. I mean, they dropped the mask in the last 10 years, right? It went from just first, the Second Amendment, according to the antis, was, AR-15s should be illegal because it's not a sporting gun. And the Second Amendment, what our founding fathers were most concerned about was blasting ducks and deer, right? As if, right? So we had this, we all remember this. There's no sporting purpose to this. There's no sporting purpose to that.
What do you need an AR-15 for, right?
Right.
Why do you need that? Like, as if need is part of the Second Amendment.
Right. Yeah. Well, my comeback is always, why do you need books, right? Or why do you need more? Why should there be more than one religion? Why should just be more than one church? To be clear, I'm not seriously advocating any of those positions, but it underlines the fact that you can extrapolate and take a look at just how absurd these positions are when we take the arguments and map them onto things that, frankly, people know a lot more about.
Sure.
One of the hurdles we have with protecting the Second Amendment is the fact that if you're not a gun person, so to speak, if you don't come from a hunting family, a sports family, a self-defense family, a law enforcement family, whatever, you have almost no exposure to any of this. You know that there's an ocean out there. You know those that, at the top you got grandpa's 1897 pump action Winchester shotgun, and then you get to grandpa's revolver, the Model 19 Smith & Wesson, the Colt Trooper, whatever it is, and then eventually at the bottom, you're at Glocks, street sweepers, AKs, whatever, right? And to them, it's easy. It's like, let's split the difference. You don't get the bottom half, right? And we just have this inclination because so many people have been growing up being told by the parents, you got to share, you got to do this, you got to do that, compromise, find the middle ground.
Yeah.
Right. And we just, like GOA, you just cannot compromise. You can never compromise when it comes to our rights, because we're not only hurting ourselves, which we shouldn't do, but we're taking away from our children and our children's children, which we have no right to do.
Yeah.
And there's a key difference there, and something that people need to remember, because we never get these rights back. I mean, the government just kind of goes one way, and that's bigger. It's very rare that we see rights ebb. They just flow, right?
Yeah.
They just go away at the end of the day. So that's all things that we have to be ever vigilant about, ever careful about, and it's why we need these strong lead blockers like GOA and other fine organizations who are going to be out there, who are going to fearlessly take the game to the streets, so to speak, as far as pushing back and all this other kind of crap. Programs like yours are out there making sure that people are informed so that they understand, here's what they're trying to do and here's how they're trying to do it. And here's what you can do to help out yourself, your children, and your grandchildren in the process.
Yeah. So, Tom, you have a few more minutes?
I've got a couple more minutes, yeah.
Okay, let's go to a quick commercial break. Speaking of GOA, and we'll come right back, and I want to talk to you about what you're working on these days. So, right back after this with Tom Grieve.
The Cali Key removes your AR from the definition of an assault weapon. It lets you keep your rifle with all its features, avoid registration hassles, and transport in hostile jurisdictions. The Cali Key also lets you hunt in jurisdictions like Pennsylvania and enhances long-range precision shooting. Cali Key's expert legal opinions empower informed decisions, and sales help grassroots Second Amendment organizations. Cali Key is your tool to keep and equip your AR, empower yourself, and defend your civil rights.
Our founding fathers saw them coming over 200 years away. That's why they wrote the Second Amendment. Join us in the fight to preserve your gun rights and stop unconstitutional gun control. Gun Owners of America is the country's only no-compromise gun rights organization. Not only do we inform and educate, but we bring the fight to court and win. Your God-given right to keep and bear arms is our top priority. Become a member today and help us take back America. Join us at gunowners.org. All right, so we are back with Tom Grieve, and thanks so much for being here, Tom. We really appreciate it, and because you're giving people knowledge that we don't normally, it's not normally mainstream. So what I wanted to do is ask you the question: what are you working on these days? Like with respect to Second Amendment issues, what's the most important stuff at the moment that you're concerned with, and stuff that you might be personally involved with?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do the very, very short list on that. The very, very short list is there's what are we playing offense on, what are we playing defense on? What are we playing offense on? Well, we've got a window right now, obviously, where we've got the White House, we've got Congress, and it's time to move the ball upfield. That's what we've been talking about the first segment of this program that I've been on, talking about the Hearing Protection Act, which is now part of the big, beautiful bill. We're talking about the short barrel issues of trying to get that in. We're talking about concealed carry reciprocity, a couple other things, but those are kind of the three, really the two, about suppressors and concealed carry reciprocity that have been kind of hogging the spotlight. So trying to see how far we can push those on a federal level. There's enormous pushes going on across different states. Different organizations are involved in it at the state level, either through lobbying, creating testimony, grassroots organizations to really push bills through to become law, or conversely, to be doing things like what GOA does all the time, filing lawsuits, winning battles, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, and watching it go that way. So there's other things too that different groups are doing as far as advocacy, like making sure that the next generation, that we do have a strong generation of shooters and sportsmen, sportswomen too, who are out there and serious about taking their Second Amendment rights, that it's not just some sort of abstract idea that they don't really know about, that they just read about in a book someday, that it's something that's in their hands, it's living, it's breathing, they can feel the purpose for it. So what I do, in addition to coordinating and consulting and doing what I can to support all those different efforts, not only here in Wisconsin, but nationally as well, is obviously I do stuff with my YouTube channel, and I've got a nerdy history bent on things sometimes. So I'll dive into the history of April 19, 1775, Lexington and Concord. And, I had a 3-part video series going into that, go into the laws about the colonists and the colonials, the laws about the early republic, and stuff that I know won't get views, but I know that there's kind of a steady trickle of people that enjoy it. And, when I go out and when I get invited out to different events and so forth, I always get a few people who are grateful for that kind of content and that kind of home. And, we're very blessed right now because there's so many great creators like yourself who are out there in this space, carrying the torch day in, day out of what's going on with the news, what's going on with all that kind of stuff. And as a result, 2 or 3 years ago, I was much more involved in that front, but now I feel like I don't have to be as much because there's so many great people and great channels that are out there. So I've kind of taken a step back. Separately, I also have my own business. I've got about 70 employees. I'm married with a truck full of kids. So I've got enough things keeping me going on all those fronts. So I just try to have my little corner of the YouTube universe and roll with it that way.
Yeah, well, you're doing really well. I just love watching your stuff because it's informative, most importantly. And we talk about being geeky or whatever with this stuff, but I'm telling you what, gun owners in America are interested in this stuff because it directly affects us. And you talk about the kids and the next generation and stuff. Well, that's what they want to do. They want the next generations to grow up as non-gun owners. This is why they try to tax ammo so you can't bring your kids to the range. It's too expensive. They want to ban it from schools. They want to make it taboo. So the kids growing up will look at guns as taboo, right? And that way they'll grow up and they won't have any, and they'll slowly kind of eliminate gun ownership. But we do have the Second Amendment, and they hate it. They absolutely hate it because it keeps getting in their way. And but anyway,
to
go ahead.
People who are newer to firearms and newer to this stuff, what I'm going to say is going to shock you, and you're going to be really jealous of us older guys now. But I remember a time when you could go to the range, shoot 1,000 rounds of 9mm, and you're spending about $30-$40
right.
or something like that. I mean. And no, it wasn't the 1970s. We're talking the aughts, the early to mid aughts here. Okay, so about 20 years ago, like this was not that long ago when you could do these things, when you could go out and purchase all this. Now, of course, what we have today is so much nicer when it comes to the gear, the scopes, the rifles. There's been a lot of movement and so forth. But man. Yeah, you're not kidding. I mean, you need to, if you want to get a kid involved in trap or something like that today as like a sport, you need to take out a second mortgage is what I'm hearing. So my kids are too young for that right now, but I'm looking, another couple years of getting them involved in this. And, I need to like, stop going out to lunch or something in order to get ready to finance this.
Yeah. You got to stop drinking that Starbucks.
Yeah, that's not a problem on my end, thankfully, but
I don't like it either.
Yeah.
Tastes burnt to me. No, Anthony and I talk about ammo prices all the time. What's a box of ammo going right now?
Well, it went down a little bit. It's
like 9mm.
$25, $26 for 50.
For 50.
Yeah.
That's cheaper than it was.
It's expensive. Well, Tom, I know you got to go. Thanks for being here. Just what's your final, where can people find you? What's your final kind of call to action?
Yeah, if people want to check me out, we release multiple videos every single week on my YouTube channel. Just punch in Tom Grieve on YouTube. You'll find me. And likewise on Twitter. I kind of go in and out of Twitter activity, but I try to post, as much fun memes and all that other kind of stuff. It's a great way for direct communication as well over there. The call to action is that unique to sportsmen, unique to Second Amendment folks, people get really discouraged because we have been the redheaded stepchild of the Constitution up until really 2008 or 2022. I'd say especially 2022, things have changed. We're now talking about playing offense. We can only do that if people vote, if people call their congressman, believe me, they care, they pay attention. When you call in, you talk to some intern, and you just feel like, yeah, I got nowhere. I wasn't able to talk to the congressman, I wasn't able to talk to the senator. Like, newsflash, unless you're a donor, that's probably not going to happen. But I'm telling you, they are asking their interns, they are asking these people, hey, how many calls do we get about this? How many calls do we get about that? They pay attention to that. They absolutely pay attention to that. So it's a myth that you think you cannot make a difference just by getting your friends to vote religiously and by calling your politicians, by writing to them. I assure you, you get 5 guys get 5 more guys. Just like April 19, 1775, the battles of Lexington and Concord. That's how they got about 10,000 militiamen activated within a 24-hour span. That's what needs to happen right now with voters. That's what we've been seeing, but we need to get better at it. Take this stuff seriously or else we're going to lose it.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's true. Anyway, well, thanks a lot, Tom. I appreciate it, and I hope to see you in Tennessee again. We'll see. But it was great talking with you. Thanks for all the advice, all the information, and we'll catch you again. Got to get you back on because I know there's a ton more stuff we can talk about.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
So, thanks a lot, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Yeah.
I want to get to one of our sponsors real quick. LifeWave is a non-transdermal patch that allows your body to produce its own natural pharmacy through light energy. Now, the X39 patch tells your body to emit heat in the form of light, which reflects back into your body, elevating a certain copper peptide. Now, this peptide activates your stem cells, which are the only type that can move throughout your body to heal inflammation. LifeWave offers an affordable membership and has a history of wellness that spans 20 years. It's been around since 2004 to help organizations like SEAL Team 6 and the Olympic swim team stay awake and alert. Today, these non-addictive patches are used by thousands of athletes and military professionals. LifeWave is available in over 80 countries, giving millions the opportunity of maximum wellness. For more information, testimonials, patents, and studies, go to justpatch.biz. Justpatch.biz. Making me laugh with the whole swimming thing. So what a great conversation though with Tom, huh? I mean, what's some great
good
information.
stuff that I didn't really know, wasn't that familiar with. It's good stuff. Good to know.
We got a few more minutes, and I wanted to bring up get you guys' opinion on some of the New York State gun laws, some of the stuff that they're pushing. New York State Senate Codes Committee plans on reviewing 6 proposed firearm bills this was actually on May 20th. And here they are. Here are the 6 things. First of all, S00362 establishes a 10-day waiting period for purchases of any firearm. Violations for such provision shall constitute a Class A misdemeanor. 10 days. Why should you have to wait 10 days?
The hell's the difference?
When's it a misdemeanor? If
you have to wait 10 days before you can actually pick up your firearm. So if you go,
what?
Yeah. Because here's the thing. Well, first of all, they're just trying to slow down the sale of firearms is really the ultimate goal. But they use the excuse that there's all these people going to the gun range, getting guns and going to kill people. It just doesn't happen. But that's their excuse.
Right, that's good.
So there you go. There's a 10-day waiting period. S04277 relates to prohibiting the possession of certain .50 caliber firearms. Directs the Division of State Police to embark on a program whereby a person currently in lawful possession of such weapons may be reimbursed for the fair market value upon turning in their weapon to the designated offer, .50 caliber. So if you remember, the governor from Jersey said they got to ban .50 calibers because people can shoot down helicopters.
What a moron.
Like that's happened, right?
That's what people are doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Bobby, I got this .50 caliber. Let's go shoot a plane down, you idiot.
So stupid.
It's like banning laser pointers because they're shining them in pilots' eyes. Right?
Exactly.
So stupid.
S06121 requires the preparation and dissemination of written materials regarding child access prevention and safe storage of firearms. Establishes such information shall be provided to students and or persons in a parental relationship to such students at the beginning of each semester or quarter of the regular school year. Basically, it's allowing for them to create new propaganda for the kids.
Good Lord.
What is this one here? Senate Bill S6121. Did I just say that one? Where's the permission to? Yeah, that I already said that one. Okay. S00399, an act to amend the penal law in relation to the regulation of pistol converters and convertible pistols, makes it illegal for certain persons to possess or sell pistol converters or a converted pistol. This is what you were talking about with the turning everything into a machine gun. This is the fear campaign. John said earlier, he said, well, what are they talking about? About, something they're going to, Trump is allowing everybody to have machine guns. Some idiotic nonsense. New York is going to ban pistol converters and stuff like that. The next one is S03385, providing for the repeal of certain provisions of the penal law related to safely storing rifles, shotguns, and firearms. Okay, so now they want to make sure that in your home, you're safely storing them if there's a minor in the house. Okay, so my question on that one is, man, what if I don't? What are you going to do about it?
How are you going to know?
How are you going to know? That's the key right there. Will this law, if it gets signed into law, turn into mandatory home inspections? Think about that for a minute.
You ain't coming in my house. Sorry.
The last one here is S072 236, an act to amend the penal law in relation to restrictions on the receipt of ammunition, prohibits the purchase of ammunition if such purchaser failed a background check, is prohibited by federal law, or is subject to temporary extreme risk protection order issued pursuant to articles. Okay. But this, they've already implemented the ammo background check, right, in New York State. You should not have to go through a background check for ammo. It's just another little roadblock. What are your guys' thoughts on this?
Does that happen when you go to purchase? What do they do?
I refuse to purchase. There's not. I don't want them. I don't need to give a background check. She can suck it.
There you go.
How about that, Hokel? You can suck it. 'Cause I'm not putting my name in your computer, so you can figure out what I'm carrying. No, I'm good.
That's a little update on New York. Now the budget's passed between now and the end of June. The New York State legislature looks to see what other bills they can pass, and we are now in the danger zone. And this was from an email from GOA New York that I received. So
This is where I come back to Elise being governor, just pointless. You're not going to beat the legislation. They're always going to tell you no. So say she comes in and she's like, well, we're going to get rid of all the gun laws. And they're going to be like, nah, sorry, we're not doing that.
Well, but she would still have to sign laws, right?
Right.
So at least she could stop the horrible stuff coming from the other end, hopefully. I mean, better than not, I guess.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want the job.
Well, I mean, what leverage does the governor have over the legislature? Would she have influence to start turning people a different way?
I don't know. It's going to be tough when you got an all-Democratic legislature.
Yeah, well, that's where we're at, boys and girls.
Dirtbag New
Thanks
York.
for watching. Anything else?
No.
We're wrapping up.
Next week we'll have to talk about the Muslim takeover.
Oh, next week we got all sorts of good stuff. All right. Thanks for watching Loaded Mike on Rumble, YouTube, and all our podcast platforms. We appreciate you being here, and please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for a lot more good stuff. I'm Dan Wass, and the Second Amendment is not a privilege; it's your right.